In the late 1990s, there were 38,000 police officers in New York. But just 1 in 100 made it into the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit.
The Emergency Service Unit, we're the SWAT and the rescue team. It's an elite group of highly trained, highly motivated individuals who work together as one cohesive unit. We've handled train crashes, people jumping off of buildings and bridges, hostage jobs, barricades, you name it, we've taken care of it.
Discipline was paramount with this type of work and the kind of weapons they carried. One moment E-men could take a life, the next moment save a life. Teamwork was everything.
There is a very strong sense of brotherhood because we are a small unit, because we work very close with each other. You get to know each other. You get to know each other's families. You bond with these guys. You depend on these guys for you to look after them and for them to take care of you. And that's what it's all about, taking care of one another.
Guys are pretty good. Guys, once you start getting the experience, you can pretty much handle anything that comes along. So you happen to be listening to the traffic channel or whatever, you hear something come over, you just go, you respond and you go do it.
But on 9/11, the E-men would be pushed to breaking point. It was 8:46 a.m. when hijacked American Airlines Flight 11 smashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. And the course of history was changed forever. ESU men on duty heard the news within seconds.
We were out in Queens visiting one of the trucks when the transmission came over. So at that point, we got in the vehicle and started heading from Queens into Manhattan.
As E-men grabbed any vehicle they could find to get to the World Trade Center, an NYPD helicopter was scrambled to investigate the burning tower. It was 8:52. The chopper was piloted by Pat Walsh, with co-pilot Detective Timothy Hayes alongside.
I had responsibility for coordinating with people on the ground, with air traffic control and emergency service. Pat was just keeping the aircraft pretty much at stable altitude, nice and slow, so we can just observe. And at one particular point, I just happened to glance out the left window, and I saw something over Staten Island that didn't look right, and it looked like another airplane. And as it was getting closer and closer, I realized it was at the same altitude as us. I said, Jesus, Pat, this plane's gonna hit us. Pat just pulled power, he started to climb, and we looked down, and so this huge commercial airliner doing 600-700 miles an hour flying right underneath us. We looked to the right, I mean, it was within seconds. It just disappeared right into the South Tower.
Hijacked United Airlines Flight 175 slammed into the South Tower at 9:03 a.m. This was disaster on an unprecedented scale. But for E-men like Kenny Winkler in the street below, the instinct to save lives did not desert them.
Looked up, saw a huge fireball, lots of debris. I happened to look to my right and I saw a woman standing in the middle of Church Street, staring up, and it just grabbed her, and we ducked behind an ambulance as the debris started raining down around us.
Kenny Winkler was in charge of organizing the E-men, the men in distinctive blue helmets, into rescue teams. He established a command post on the edge of the World Trade Center. Team 1 is seen here in the North Tower, making its way to a staircase. The massive explosions had knocked out the lifts in both towers. So the only way to get to the people who needed rescuing was to climb one of the 3 staircases in each tower.
My plan was, as people were reporting to me, I was assigning them to teams. I know I have 2 teams in the North Tower. I'm going to put a team in the South Tower, North Tower, until I get 6 teams climbing those stairs.
ESU trucks raced against time to get to the command post. E-men were used to battling through traffic to save lives. But when the second airliner crashed into the World Trade Center, every E-man now knew this was no accident. America was under attack.
When I got down to the scene and you looked up and you saw I can say that, you know, I've done a lot of things in my career as a police officer. That was the one day that I was truly afraid.
Evan Schwerner, seen here on the left, had been an E-man for over 3 years.
It was a sick feeling. Somebody's actually attacking our country. You kind of make peace with yourself and like, listen, I got to go. It's my job. We're going to go in. If we come out, we come out. But we got to go try to help people. That's our job.
Mark DeMarco got to work immediately he arrived here on Vesey Street.
When I first pulled up, somebody had yelled to me. They said, there's a guy laying on the sidewalk over here and he's in bad shape. I ran over to him. His back was like raw meat, but he was conscious. Brian McDonald had come running over to me. I said, we got to get the first aid kit and a scoop stretcher. We were trained to rescue people, but this was on such a large scale, you couldn't comprehend what was going on. So like, you just kind of had to focus what was in front of you.
We started gathering up all our equipment to put it on, our helmet, rope, harnesses. We were gathering equipment that we were going to need to help the people. And you'd see the people that were there hanging out, and we were used to saving these people, you know, if they were jumpers. And I just looked up and I remembered, I said, I wish I can help you, but there was nothing I could do because the fires were down below them.
Lieutenant John Murphy was assigned to lead E-men just arrived from the Bronx in Team 5.
I had worked in the Bronx with these guys, so they were kind of happy to see me, and I was happy to see them going into this scene with guys that I knew and was comfortable with.
But the job ahead of them was daunting. The magnitude of the attack on the two vast towers turned the plaza into a battlefield. If the E-men were to rescue people from the towers, they must first avoid being hit by debris raining down like shells. Team 5 was caught here on camera in the World Trade Center.
As we came out onto the plaza, there were still pieces of building coming down, pieces of the aircraft were coming down, and also pieces of people were coming down. And it almost seemed surreal because we had literally body parts hitting the plaza, and it looked almost like a butcher's shop, just looked like pieces of meat. We were trying to use the overhangs of the buildings, and we would spot for each other as we were making our way across the plaza. So if it looked clear, we would call out, and basically you'd run to the next point where you could possibly get some cover.
Tragically, people trapped on the upper floors faced an impossible choice: to burn alive or jump.
People are landing right where we were, almost feet away from us. It's just inconceivable to comprehend, and your heart just sinks into your stomach. So you can only imagine how bad it's got to be on those upper floors for somebody to want to do that.
An ESU team was scrambled to carry out an air rescue. The E-men hoped to pluck people from the rooftops of the blazing towers. But as Bill Kennedy and his team flew towards the infernos, the chance of saving anybody was fast running out.
We did focus our energies on the North Tower because we could still see the roof. There was a possibility maybe if somebody made it to the roof. We had a very short window of opportunity if somebody was on that roof, but there was nobody on that roof. And the window of opportunity closed really quickly with the amount of smoke and the heat that was being generated from that fire. But you had people looking at you, people who were restaurant workers, people who were office workers in their suits, people who could have been your brother, your sister, your aunt, your uncle, waving to you, looking at you, waving to you, and you can't do nothing to help them. It was a horrible feeling of not being able to do anything.
If rooftop rescues were out of the question, much depended on the ESU teams making their way up from the ground. It was 9:40 a.m. Kenny Winkler wanted to know what was happening to his 4 teams in the towers.
At that point, I get everybody on the radio. Where are you and who are you with? We had Sergeant Coughlin's team, Sergeant Gillis's team, Sergeant Curtin's team. Everybody responded back to me where they were. And I remember the response from Sergeant Coughlin and Sergeant Gillis's team were in the South Tower, that they were in the 20-something floor heading up, and they were having a difficult time making it up the stairs because of all the people in the stairwell.
The stairs were the only way for the thousands of people below the fires to evacuate the buildings. But unlike this training video, progress up and down the stairways was alarmingly slow. It was 9:50 a.m. Sergeant Mike Curtin led Team 3. It included fellow officers Joe Vigiano and John Delara. He picked Mark DeMarco to join them. They were assigned to climb Stairwell C of the North Tower.
As we were making our way up the stairs, people were still evacuating coming down. It was just a constant flow. It was like swimming against the tide, so to speak, pushing past everybody. When we reached the 9th floor, people who were coming out into the staircase, they said, there's a woman to the side. She's unable to move. She was very upset. She was overwhelmed with everything going on. So the 5 of us walked over to her. Mike Curtin was giving her some water. Me and Steve Blyer, we told Sergeant Curtin, so we're going to do a sweep of the whole floor. And me and Steve went to get a drink because there was a water cooler. And as we went to take a drink, we heard this rumbling start.
It was 9:59 a.m. The South Tower had been burning for almost an hour. Temperatures of nearly 2,000 degrees were gravely weakening its steel structure.
I heard a roar, and this noise was so loud that it overtook the rotor of the helicopter. And it just seemed like that tower, it just started churning. And as it started churning, you started seeing dust and debris coming up out of it.
Team 5 were 110 stories below out on the plaza.
As we were working our way over to Tower 1 and looked up, and it looked like a wave of just black and gray coming from the South Tower.
It was the most deafening, horrible noise I've ever heard. I couldn't believe just the sound of it coming down. I mean, being right there.
At that point, we turned and we tried to run. The ground underneath our feet was just bouncing and buckling. And as we were making our way, it literally lifted us off the ground and blew us into the wall.
I know the size of those buildings. I know how many people work in those buildings. All these poor people who are guilty of nothing but just coming to work, gone.
It's gone! The whole tower! It's gone! Holy crap! They knocked the whole freaking thing down!
Gone also were the 2 teams of E-men on the 20th floor of the South Tower. They died instantly, doing their job, trying to rescue people. The plaza was now covered in a mass of rubble under a dense cloud of toxic dust.
At that point, we were in complete darkness. As it was happening, I was kind of surprised that I was still alive at that point.
We had our self-contained breathing apparatus on, but I didn't have enough time to don it. I was breathing out of my glove. I was using it kind of like a filter over my mouth and my nose, just trying to breathe in like that. I pulled off a golf ball size of this mix of glass and debris out of my mouth. And it was at that point I was like, well, I don't think I'm going to make it through.
Incredibly, all of Team 5 survived, protected by the buildings seen here on the right.
We kind of felt along the ground, got together, felt for our tools, and we could see a little bit of light starting to break through, maybe about 8 feet up. And we kind of just worked our way towards the light and crawled up the debris pile and back out onto the plaza.
The man in charge, Kenny Winkler, also survived, but now he urgently needed to speak to the teams in the North Tower.
I was able to duck behind one of the trucks, and immediately as the dust was blowing through the streets, radioing the teams in the North Tower to evacuate.
Kenny said, everybody in tower want to evacuate. Evacuate immediately. He says, get the hell out of there now.
It was a vital communication. No one in the North Tower stairways realized the other tower had just collapsed. Team 1 was on the 33rd floor. They could make a rapid descent as there were no more civilians in their stairway. But progress was much slower for Team 3 on the 9th floor. Many evacuees still needed to be led down Stairway C. The E-men did their job.
I had gone down to the bottom of the staircase. It was the second floor lobby, which was level with the outdoor plaza. As the people were coming down, I would just direct them. I'd say, follow the wall line, because it was very cloudy, dusty. And as they would come out, I would direct them to stay along the wall. When you get to the doorway, I said, run. I said, don't panic. Try not to panic. I said, just run from the site.
People emerged onto the plaza, but escape was difficult in the lingering dust cloud. The E-men of Team 5 set to work.
They'd come out, they go, where do we go? So we spread out like a human chain of, emergency service police officers, and we're like, go to the next cop over there, he'll show you where to go. They were very distressed, they were crying, and we were just trying to calm them down as quickly as we could and send them off to the next cop in order to get them out.
At that time, I'm kind of in communication with my guys and, helping people, but also keeping an eye on where my team is, just because I wanted to keep everyone where I could see them. When I got hit by a piece of steel coming off the North Tower, I was actually talking into my radio at the time, and it clipped the top of my helmet, knocked my helmet off, and the next thing I knew, I didn't even feel it, but my radio was gone, and my hand was hanging and dangling, and arterial blood was just spurting out.
John Murphy's hand was saved by the quick actions of Steve Lanos. ESU teams always included an E-man trained as a medic to aid civilians and officers alike. It was 10:23. No more evacuees were emerging from the stairways. Team 3 were finally exiting the North Tower. But though time was fast running out, Sergeant Curtin wanted his men to keep searching as they went.
We had crossed over the plaza area from building 1 to 6. Sergeant Mike Curtin told me and Bill Bury, check the lobby first, make sure everybody's evacuated out of this lobby in building 6, and then we'll get the hell out of here.
After the South Tower collapsed, a new command post was set up at the corner of West and Vesey Streets. It was here that evacuees were sent by Team 5. Everyone sensed that any moment now, the North Tower was coming down. But back on the plaza, Evan Schwerner was having problems.
This one woman comes out, she's extremely heavy, about 300 pounds, and she couldn't go anymore. I'm trying to help her, and she just wouldn't get up. She says, I can't do it, I can't go on. I'm like, you have to, because we're gonna die. We gotta get out of here. And that's when Richie Hardigan came looking for me. So, Richie, you gotta help me with this woman, she's not moving. He looked right at her, and in the way Richie does, he just tried to motivate her and screamed at her and goes, get the F up, we gotta go. So he gets on one side of her, and we're walking out with her, and at that point, we see in front of us Chief Pertel, and he looks at us and he goes, "What the hell are you guys still doing here?" I go, "Chief, we gotta get this woman." He goes, "Get her out of here as fast as you can, you gotta go." So he's screaming at her, Richie's screaming at her, I'm just like, let's go. We took her and we bring her down the stairs and we handed her off to a female Port Authority cop.
ESU teams 3 and 5 helped over 100 of the last evacuees to safety from the stricken tower, but at an enormous risk to their own lives. It was 10:28. The North Tower was about to collapse, but the two teams of E-men were still below.
We were walking toward the West Street bridge overpass, and we started to hear this rumbling again. Turned, I looked out the lobby windows, and everything was getting dark very, very quick, in a matter of seconds. I dove for the floor. I said to myself, "This is it, I hope it goes quick."
I said, I've already been through this once before. I said, what's the chances of me surviving a second collapse?
Steel screeching, just bending, and looking up, seeing again just a big black wave coming down out of the sky.
There was a little cubby hole where I went into, and I said, all right, I'll be here, I'll be safe from anything that's going to collapse down on me.
There was a truck on the corner where we were, just kind of ran and dove behind it and underneath it.
As quick as everything happened, everything went dead silent. Everything was black, and for a second I said to myself, this is what death is? Am I dead? I went to breathe, and I started choking on the dust and everything. And although I'm choking on gasp for air, I'm saying, well, that's a good sign too. I guess I'm still alive.
Here in the devastation of the World Trade Center, David Brink and Team 5 survived by hugging the wall of the plaza.
I was very scared. I was choking so hard, I actually thought I was going to drown in all the smoke and debris that was getting into my mouth and lungs. But I was like, all right, I'm still alive. However, we have to get out of this situation now. So you want to put your training to good use to try to get yourself out of that situation, get yourself unburied.
On 9/11, many people died during the 11 seconds it took for the North Tower to collapse. Unbeknown to their brothers at the time, the ESU lost 4 men: John DeLara, Joe Vigiano, Vinnie Dents, and Sergeant Mike Curtin. New York was now a war zone. When the towers came down, just a split second made the difference between life and death. But with all E-men, their motivation to save lives could not be faulted.
As debris was coming down, Steve had gotten hit by a piece of debris in the head and kind of knocked him out for a couple of seconds. And at this time now, he's helping me along, but he's been knocked out and he's kind of banged up and a little woozy, so I'm trying to help him along. At that point, an ambulance happened to pull out in front, just flagged it down.
It was 10:40. The ESU command post was in crisis. Many radio communications to E-men were not getting a response. It was Kenny Winkler's job to find out who was still alive.
We were trying to raise all of our team members over the radio, knowing very well that someone never going to answer. I also had people trapped, so we were in the process of forming rescue teams to go rescue the rescuers.
The E-men were stretched to the limit. While some were rescuing civilians, others were trapped in the ruins of the World Trade Center. The 4 E-men killed when the North Tower collapsed were from Team 3. But the remainder of the team, Mark DeMarco, Bill Bowery, and Steve Blyer survived. They were lucky. They were searching the customs house when the avalanche of debris came down. But they weren't safe yet. The building that had saved them was filled with thick, acrid dust.
I started yelling out, and I could hear other people yelling out, "Billy, where are you? Mark, where are you?" And you could hear other people, you know, "Over here, over here, over here. You all right? Yeah."
Mark started to lead the three of them along the wall, seen here in this photograph.
I put my hand up on the wall, and I pulled my mag light out, and I put my hand, I felt like a doorway. Take another step, and I couldn't feel the floor. Past my shoes, I didn't see anything. I could see debris where I was standing, but just beyond that, it was total blackness. I waved my foot around to see if there was anything to step on, and I didn't feel anything.
The E-Man was standing on the edge of the vast chasm created by the collapsed tower. But Bill Bowery and Steve Blyer were still moving forward behind him.
I'm pushing back to keep these guys from pushing me forward, maybe falling into whatever this was. And I'm yelling, you know, "Stop pushing, stop, we gotta go back the other way." And we made it back almost all the way to where the glass doors were for the West Street overpass walkway.
By 11 o'clock, fires were breaking out on West Street. As fresh E-Men arrived, the survivors of Team 3 were spotted on the terrace of the customs house. They were helped down onto street level and hosed with water to remove the dust. It was a rescue of the rescuers.
We were outside. I want to say we were breathing fresh air and shaking our heads in a state of shock. A couple of guys were hugging each other. For the first time since this whole thing started, I felt safe. I felt it was over. I was able to go home. I was able to see my kids grow up.
Sergeant John Lamkin caught up with the rescued E-Man.
Mark DeMarco, unflappable on everything. And I remember walking up to him, and I remember the look in his eye. I said, "Mark, how was it?" And he said, and I remember this, he said, "John, it's bad. It's very bad." And that struck me as just like, you know, like ice water. I was like, wow.
The debris from the destruction of the two vast towers was spread out over a huge area. Dust and smoke added to the disorientation of those moving through the streets. But Team 5 managed to make their way out from the depths of the catastrophe.
I was very, very relieved that I had come through it, literally unscathed. I was very surprised that I made it through the first collapse. And after the second collapse, the same thing. It was a miracle that we had survived.
Me and Bobby was sitting on the ground by a police vehicle, cleaning ourselves off. And he was pretty banged up. His elbows were shot. We were drained. Everything was out of us.
Where we possibly could. Pushing the limits, certainly pushing the limits of any kind of safety procedures there were. We're just non-existent, throw them out the window. We needed to find people, and we needed to find people quick.
The first thing that we did was say, well, where is the best chances of success? And we said, well, we got to start looking for voids, and that's what we did. The thing is still moving. The earth is moving. It's on fire. There's smoke billowing out of these voids.
We had access to the lower concourse, so there were areas like where the Borders bookstore was, where there were escalators, where we were able to go down. We were able to go down to where the subway was, or to areas where pieces of steel had crossed, where you could get underneath. And you were able to get to a certain point where you had a complete collapse. You know, you were able to identify floors. Each floor was compacted to probably a space of 12 to 16 inches. And, you know, so you couldn't penetrate that with just simple hand tools. But you were where we could get in, we would take a look. You always have that hope in the back of your mind that there is a survivor in a void.
But as the afternoon ticked away, the news was not good.
We found plenty of body parts, and we found people that were deceased, but we didn't find anybody that was alive. That was probably one of the hardest things that we got faced with.
The hours passed. Buildings damaged by the collapsing towers burned ferociously into the evening. Despite the danger, E-men continued with their painstaking search. But still, the elite rescuers found no survivors. Then, at 8 o'clock, there was news. 2 Port Authority cops had been found alive, but trapped. The ESU men set off to do their job. It was the start of one of the most remarkable rescues in the history of New York. Cops Will Hameno and John McLaughlin were trapped 30 feet inside the pile. The first E-men to get to the scene were officers Paddy McGee from Manhattan and Scott Strauss from Long Island. They were about to embark on the most dangerous mission of their lives.
I'm on my knees in this small hole, and the hole we're in, the area around us is on fire. The smoke is billowing up at us. And as I'm climbing down this hole head first on an angle about 30 feet down, I'm saying goodbye to my kids and my wife, to myself. I told my wife, Pat, that I loved her. I told my kids to take care of Mom, to do the best they possibly could do in life, and I apologize for getting myself killed. I said that to myself as I'm climbing down the hole because I didn't think I was coming out. We were in a very, very confined area, and it kind of like a horseshoe. We get to this wall, and then on a horizontal platform is Will. He's laying on his back, and the only thing we can see of him is his head. His right arm is free, and part of his right side. Everything else is encased in rubble. We can't see each other at times. Even though I'm right next to Will's head, I can't see him because of the choking smoke.
Here at the scene of the rescue, many emergency workers wanted to help. But the tunnel was so restricted, it was only possible for one rescuer to be next to Will Hameno at a time. If the E-men were going to get him out, they had to make the space bigger. Scott was assisted by paramedic Chuck Sirica.
You can only stay clawing at Will with your bare hands for about 15, 20 minutes. And then I would back out, Chuck would go in. Chuck would come out, I would go in, until we got this opening a little bit bigger.
The rescuers now called out for hand tools. ESU expertise in knowing the right tool for the job was vital when lives were at stake.
We basically formed a sort of like a conga line between the emergency service cops and firemen and anybody that was there. And anything that Patty or Scotty needed, they were radioing to me, and we were getting the equipment up to them.
They passed a set of these extended straps. I wrap it around Will's chest and under his arms, and I'm trying to pull Will out. I can't do it. I don't have the strength. I don't have the leverage. I yell for some help. Chuck comes in, and Chuck and I are chest to chest in this opening, no bigger than the area beneath the chair I'm sitting on. And we have our hands above our heads, we're laying on our sides, and we're trying to pull Will out, trying to yank him out. And he's screaming in pain.
Conditions were in the extreme. Firemen feared that burned-out buildings could come down at any moment. For those deep within the pile, there would be no chance of escape. It was an incredible test of endurance, way beyond the call of duty.
The area topside was just as bad as the area in that hole. That hole, that debris pile was shifting, it was on fire, it was continually moving, and there was a point where The rescuers above us and the firemen were saying, guys, get out of there. And this building is starting to collapse down on top of all of us. So they're yelling to us to get out of there. And Will says, you're not leaving me, are you? I go, no, we're not leaving you, Will. You know, whatever it is, you know. One way or another, we're getting you out. Did I want to go? You better believe I did. But I couldn't, because there was no way I could go home and look at my kids and look at myself in the mirror knowing that I left somebody there to die and didn't do my best to get them out.
Scott Strauss and Chuck Sirica held their nerve for one more try to free the entombed cop.
Chuck is stretching one arm down and trying to get his body, three of us, into a hole that's not fit for one person. And Will is screaming, absolutely screaming. Sorry, Will, sorry, Will. And he's like, just do it, just do it, just do it. Don't worry about me. And we free his leg, and we hoisted him out, and Will's free.
It was 11 o'clock at night. The rescue of Will Jimeno had taken 3 hours. Scott Strauss emerged exhausted from the hole. Job done. But as he made his way down the pile, he was concerned to tell his fellow E-men about what he'd discovered.
Scotty Strauss came up, obviously very fatigued, dehydrated. And Scotty told me, you know, Kenny, John McLaughlin's down there. And we knew John McLaughlin. We had trained with John. We had trained not that long ago at the World Trade Center. So I said, okay, Scotty, you guys get out of here. You know, we got it.
Emotions were high as they passed the rescued cop down the pile. After so much death, it was an important success for all those in emergency services.
When we got Willie out, he had to be physically passed through everybody, and everybody got to kind of, you know, to hold on to him as he goes down. So it was truly an uplifting thing. And he was in very bad shape, but knowing that he was alive was an amazing thing.
But the job was only half done. Sergeant John McLaughlin was trapped even deeper into the pile. He is seen here before setting off to lead his team to the South Tower. They never made it. But having miraculously survived 2 collapses, he managed to hang on to life, buried under tons of metal and concrete. By the time ESU medic John Bushing descended into the rescue hole, Sergeant McLaughlin had been trapped for 14 hours.
When I got to the end of this tunnel, there was John McLaughlin, and he was face down, just buried from his waist down when I had gotten to him. He was conscious. He said he was in extreme pain from his waist down, and just get him out as quickly as we could. What we wanted to do was to keep him hydrated so that his kidneys kept working, and we wanted to keep him as comfortable as he could be with the morphine, but only one person at a time could be with him. So while I was doing medical care, nobody was digging him out.
A refreshed Bill Kennedy came back on duty at midnight.
I took up the position as the team safety officer at this point, and what we would do was I would make sure that whatever 2 guys went down that hole, I'd cut them off in 10 or 15 minutes, get them out of the hole. And these guys, as we started rotating people in, they just started coming. They just started showing up, and everybody was taking pieces of metal, pieces of debris, cutting things with cordless saws, or using little rabbit tools to take whatever. Each little piece of debris that you were slowly able to remove revealed more and more of his body. It was a slow, painstaking effort to get to John McLaughlin, but it worked.
John McLaughlin was finally brought out at 7 o'clock the next morning. With great skill, the E-men managed to save his life and his legs. The rescue of the 2 cops was an extraordinary achievement. Despite the tragedies of 9/11, the day saw many acts of great courage. ESU teams were awarded Medals of Valor for the part they played in rescuing survivors. But memories of 9/11 hold more than honor for the E-men of New York.
The brotherhood was very, very strong amongst all of us. And the guys that we lost that day, it was like a big crack in that brotherhood. Guys that wouldn't come back. And it was just left a big void in all of our lives.
My men and the other guys in the unit, they knew there was a job to be done. They knew it was dangerous. They knew that they might not be coming out. And 14 of the guys from the unit didn't come out again. But the other guys put themselves in harm's way without even thinking about it to help other people. So that makes me very proud of the unit and the men that I work with.
The fire department of New York is one of the biggest in the world. In the 1990s, its firefighters tackled nearly 30,000 fires a year. They were known as New York's bravest and prided themselves on how they rescued people, whatever the cost.
You're the last chance that they have. It's your responsibility to go there and help these people out. That's why firefighters are friendly guys and friendly to each other. We might be the last people we ever see. And it takes a particular personality to go into a burning building.
Attacking the fires needed battalions of ladder and engine companies in firehouses all over the city. By far the closest firehouse to the World Trade Center was on Liberty Street. In case of emergency, the men of Ten House would be first on the scene, where 50,000 people worked. It was a responsibility that drew all who joined them together.
They put me in ladder 10. I show up at the door, introduce myself. The captain says, you know, when you come to find a firehouse, just look for the biggest building in the city. We're right at the bottom of it. I became close with them only because it was a brotherhood. Where did they show up? They showed up at ladder 10, engine 10, 10 house.
The men of Ten House were proud of their work. Yet until the 1993 bombing, they had dealt with only one fire at the World Trade Center in 18 years. So amongst the city's firefighters, working at Ten House was considered a soft touch. John Morabito was Ladder 10's driver.
We were in an area that was secure. Most buildings were made of concrete and steel. They had a lot of fire suppression and sprinkler systems, so we didn't go on a lot of fire calls. So we took a lot of ribbing from other fire departments that we were a slow house, that we weren't really a very busy house. We always had pride in ourselves, so we'd always just say, well, yeah, we'll see you at the big one, you know, we'll catch you at the big one.
At 8:30 on the morning of 9/11, firefighters at Ten House were changing shifts. Teams of 6 for each truck ate breakfast and chatted with their brothers as they handed over. They included probies, probationary firefighters, like newly married Jimmy Brown.
I was a brand new probie, still learning the ropes, but that's what every firefighter lives for, a first due job, where you can put the fire out, especially if you're on the engine. If you have the nozzle, you're actually putting the wet stuff on the red stuff, and that's what you live for.
It was 8:46 a.m. American Airlines Flight 11 was hurtling towards the Twin Towers. The big one, an event that would change the world, was about to begin.
I look up, and you can actually feel the heat from the fireball. And you saw this huge fireball, and then just debris come raining down. And then after that, I ran over to get my gear, because we were getting ready to roll.
Another probie at 10 House that morning was Sean Talon.
I remember turning to Sean Talon, who was a probie at the time, and I said, Sean, stay close to me. You know, I'm not a senior man or anything, but I have a little more experience than you, and we're gonna see some really bad stuff today.
On Liberty Street, 10 House companies got ready for action as all firefighters in Lower Manhattan responded.
We all ran downstairs, put on our bunker gear. Myself and Terry Rivera jumped on the back step of ladder 10.
I drove out onto the apron, which is the sidewalk right in front of our fire station, and as soon as I got to the street, I stopped and I looked at the lieutenant, and I said, this is people in the street. This is bodies. And he goes, I know. He goes, we can't help them. He says, let's go to the people we can help. And as I rolled out, I could feel pieces of flesh under my tires of my fire truck.
Lieutenant Greg Atlas was in charge of Engine 10 that morning. Within the first minute of the plane's impact on the North Tower, he was radioing Manhattan Control.
Engine 1 out of Manhattan. Engine 1 out. Engine 1 out, World Trade Center, 1060. Send every available ambulance, everything you got to World Trade Center now.
1060 was the firefighters' code for a major emergency. Seconds later, at 8:48, Greg Atlas radioed again.
Engine 1 out of Manhattan. Engine 1 out. It appears an airplane crashed into the World Trade Center. Roll every available ambulance you got to this position.
Engine 10 drove round the corner onto West Street as other companies approached the entrance to the North Tower. Nothing could prepare them for what they found.
I was coming right up onto One World Trade Center when a gentleman came out of the lobby, and he was completely engulfed in flames. His skin was dripping like wax. He had no expression on his face. And he stopped right in front of my fire truck, and he just looked at me. And I could see his eyes were black. I slammed on the brakes of the fire truck. We ran over with a fire extinguisher, and we started to spray his body with water to try to cool him down. We put him in a stretcher, and we put him on that first ambulance. They immediately got him off to the hospital.
Got to the entrance, and there was 2 burn victims there, the male and the female. And the first one I came to was a female. She was still alive, albeit she was in agony, because I remember her rolling around, gurgling, and she was burned from head to toe. I says, all right, the medics will be right behind us. They'll help this person. You have to go do your job. Part of that job was getting past this woman, and the only way past her was to step over her. And it took everything I had to physically step over her and not help her.
As the company of Engine 10 waited for orders in the lobby of the North Tower, Greg Atlas can be seen here at the command post. His wife, Joanne, was at a coffee shop near their home in upstate New York.
I heard a woman say, we have to keep praying. And I said, is everything all right? And she said to me, a plane hit the Trade Center. And you kind of feel everything drain out of you. And all I could think, oh my God, Greg is down there. You know, where is he?
The horror that confronted the 10 House firefighters had only just begun. In their race to save lives, some would be only moments from death. At 9:02 a.m., a second hijacked plane powered towards the World Trade Center. New Yorkers had never witnessed such an attack. Yet these terrible moments of death galvanized those whose job it was to save lives. Wherever they were, hundreds of New York's off-duty firefighters dropped what they were doing and raced to their firehouses. Those in Ten House just had to head for the blazing towers. The huge pall of smoke they made left the city's firefighters in no doubt it was the big one. But for the Ten House brothers, this was personal.
As they're driving on the bridge, I could see clearly now that the two towers have been struck, and picking up speed, and I'm doing about 60, 70 miles an hour, and I look behind me, I got all police cars and emergency vehicles all following me too. I'm leading the parade here.
Geez, I was there so fast, my car was smoking because it wouldn't go any faster than it was going. And the only people going in the direction I was going in were all the firemen and cops. I could see the smoke and the buildings. I'm like, oh God, this is worse than I thought it was.
West Street, 9:10 a.m. Both Ten House trucks remain where they were left, most of their firefighters now climbing the North Tower. The role of Engine 10 is to get water up to the 93rd floor where the fire was raging. It is pumped from a hydrant, and the firefighters' mission is to connect their hoses to a network of standpipes. Meanwhile, the off-duty Ten House firefighters were heading for Liberty Street at the very foot of the South Tower. Here, in front of their firehouse, awaited a scene of unimaginable horror.
I'm able to park my vehicle, and I start running up Liberty Street. I could start seeing there's body parts all in the street. And I cut down, I want to get into the firehouse, and as I'm running, I'm trying to be careful where I'm stepping because the road is littered, like with this. And I just get about into the back of the firehouse, and I go up to where my helmet, coat, and boots are all still on the rack right now.
As brother firefighters arrive at Ten House, they are met by frightened civilians taking shelter with security personnel. A young probie is overawed at how they could rescue people above the fire. But for Lieutenant Joe Torillo, the situation is very clear.
I was standing outside, and it's obvious that everybody's going to die above that point of impact. We can't get them, and they can't get down. So for the first time in your career, you don't even make an effort to try to save somebody. It's not happening. You really have to concentrate on evacuating as many people as you can and assisting the injured.
Nonetheless, many Ten House brothers set off fully prepared to tackle the infernos raging in each tower. As they carried their heavy gear along Liberty Street, John Morabito took the lead in organizing the mass evacuation of office workers. He is seen here, walking behind Chief Pfeiffer.
While I'm in the lobby, I'm going to start to try to evacuate people because now there's hundreds of people coming down the stairs. And I says, let's set up this evacuation line. Let's send you down towards the subway because going out to the street is unsafe. There is debris falling, there are people jumping, and if we send you to the subway, you should be safe underground. And as they're coming down the stairs, I'm standing right by this door, and I'm pushing them through the door, and I'm sending them down towards the subway line. There are people that are having a hard time breathing, so I was grabbing civilians and I was saying, get that woman under the arms and get her out of here. Yes, sir. They picked the woman up. They escorted her out of the building. I would say probably close to 3,000 or 4,000 people came down past my location, and they were coming in droves, and they were bleeding, and they were burnt, and they were panicking, and they were screaming, but they were following our instructions, and they were evacuating the building.
By 9:40 a.m., the evacuation from the North Tower had been going on for just over an hour. Although thousands of people had been helped to escape the burning building, hundreds were still slowly making their way down the stairs. Among them was Jean Potter.
When we got to about the 10th, 9th, 8th floor, I felt a sense of urgency, and people were getting tired, obviously, and I started yelling at people to move it. Let's go, move it, and that is very out of character for me. And I just felt that the clock was ticking. We had to get out of here.
Jean was married to 10-house firefighter Dan Potter. She knew Dan was officially off duty, but she also knew her husband would feel duty-bound to be there.
One of the last people to come down the stairs is Jean Potter, and she came up to me. She says, "Is Danny Potter working? Is he working today?" I said, "No." I said, "Danny's okay." I said, "He's fine. He's not working. He's fine." I said, "But you need to keep moving." I said, "We have to get you out of here." I said, "I don't know what else is going to happen."
I wanted to go to 10 House, and he said, "Absolutely not. You cannot go to the firehouse," because I figured Dan would be there or he would go there, and that was the best place for me to go. And he said, "You cannot go there."
In that moment, John saved Jean's life. If she had gone in the opposite direction, she would almost certainly have died. The time was 9:55. Evacuees continue to stream out from the towers. Amongst them is Jean Potter.
I came out. I sensed burning debris all around me. I looked at my watch. It was 9:55 a.m. I proceeded to walk. There was a woman in front of me that stumbled, and I gently helped her regain her footing. And I ran into one of our doormen. And I said, "Richard, what happened?" He said, "We've been hit. We were under attack." I proceeded to walk down the rest of the block when all of a sudden I hear rumbling. And it was horrible.
Just about run out of the firehouse. A firefighter standing in the door sticks his arm out and he clotheslines me, catches me right underneath the neck. And he looks up, he goes, "Holy cow, here it comes." And with that, I looked up real quickly and I could see the South Tower. I could see it just starting to twist and it start to come down.
I'm running and I could see the South Bridge, and I'm saying if I could run fast enough and make it underneath that bridge, maybe they'll find and identify my body. And as I'm running, I could feel wind pressure on the back of my neck, and you could hear boom, 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 boom.
I was picked up in a whirl of wind, and this hot ash was hitting me in the face and this debris, and I was spun around off the ground. I landed up against the wall, and I crawled up, and I was
loud and so violent, and we all looked at each other, and thankfully we were on the same page. From my company, we said, "We got to get the hell out of here." So we decided, as a company, we were going to evacuate.
10-house firefighters racing through the streets to join their colleagues were enveloped by a vast, acrid dust cloud.
And when the dust came over, it was hot. It was hot and gritty. It was on the back of my neck, and there was no way of breathing. I had my face inside my shirt, couldn't breathe. Every time you rub your face, the glass and the grit would make you bleed.
Thousands of civilians and evacuees were caught in the dust-filled streets around the World Trade Center. Those nearer the collapsed building suffered disorientation and breathing problems.
Where are we? Which way to go?
Jean Potter was near Broadway.
I was walking in gray falling snow. It was so silent. I was wet from being in the concourse, and then this gray snow was falling on me. And I just asked, "Where are the towers? Are the towers behind me?" I was very disoriented. And someone said yes, and I just proceeded to walk.
As Jean wandered through the dust cloud, her husband, Dan Potter, feared she was still in the North Tower.
Mel Hazley was a fire marshal. And I said, "Mel, it's me, Dan." And he looked, he goes, "Danny." He said, "Oh my God, Danny, are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm okay." I said, "Mel," I said, "But Jean," I said, "Jean's on the 81st floor. I think she's got to be up on the roof of the North Tower." And he's looking, he's going, he's like, "Oh, this ain't good. This is not going to be good."
As the minutes slipped away, time was running out for anyone who remained in the doomed building. The North Tower was now a ticking time bomb. The collapse of its twin had shown that it could only endure the intense heat of the fires for so long. Fire chiefs in the North Tower had ordered a mayday within 2 minutes of the South Tower's collapse. Mayday means one thing to firefighters: get out of the building. But the radioed messages were only received by some of the firefighters scattered up and down the vast edifice.
They had to run up a couple of flights for myself and a couple of other firefighters to pull us down and say a mayday was given. And we insisted that we were going to go with our company that were waiting for us just a couple of floors above, but a mayday was given, so we made our way down.
Other fire companies were doing different things. Some were standing fast, some were taking a rest, some were continuing up.
The enormous pile of rubble from the collapsed building filled the ground floors of the North Tower with thick black dust. John Morabito had heard no mayday as he searched for a way out.
I'm wandering around this darkness, continuing to the left, trying to get out of the building. And on the right side of me, I see a 10-foot by 10-foot patch of light gray in this blackness. I said, that's a window. I'm going to go out that way.
It was 10:15 a.m. Fire had been raging on the stricken floors for over 90 minutes. Many firefighters still did not know the South Tower had collapsed. Ladder 10's Lieutenant Stephen Harrell and Proby Sean Talon were somewhere between the 30th and 40th floors. So too was seasoned firefighter Jeff Olson.
There was no doubt in my mind that he was in there. His company is obviously first due to the World Trade Center. So when the first tower came down, I thought to myself, oh, this is going to be bad. Somebody is going to get hurt. I have these babies. I better take a shower and get dressed, because I know if something happens to him, they're going to send a car to come and pick me up.
By now, some of the firefighters of Engine 10 had reached the base of the North Tower. When George Bachman exited onto the plaza, he saw Chief Gansey, head of the New York Fire Department, at the command post.
Chief Gansey was on the radio. I reported to him, and I asked him, Chief, what is it I could do for you? He said there was problems with the radio and needed me to go back and reconnoiter whatever was left of the South Tower and give a report. So I made my way towards the South Tower ruins.
A collapsed building of this magnitude was unprecedented in the history of New York's fire department. Yet firefighters immediately set about searching for survivors in the most dangerous conditions.
Chief Brown, Mayday, Liberty and West, I'm trapped in the rubble.
And despite breakdowns in communications, if a radio was heard, there was a chance of rescue.
They were digging through the debris, and they found me, and they dragged me out, and I couldn't see because my eyes were so damaged, and they were trying to comfort me, and I was screaming every time they touched me because my ribs were broken, my arm was twisted and snapped, my back was crushed, my head was open, I was bleeding internally. And I heard them say that they were going to get a stretcher, and I begged them, I says, please just go, leave me, I'm not going to make it. And they said, no, we're going to take you with us.
At 10:17 a.m., Proby Jimmy Brown reached the exit of the North Tower. By now, he had lost sight of his fellow 10-house firefighters. But as jumpers and debris continued to rain down, Jimmy dutifully responded to the command of another unit's officer to help evacuate a last group of civilians.
We weren't cohesive units at that point. And he says, listen, we need to make a human line underneath 6 World Trade Center and guide them out to Vesey Street around the building. So me, being a good Proby that I was, following orders, I said, okay. And I didn't even really look up to see if anything was coming. I just kind of turned my head up and just made a mad dash. And I got to the overhang, and I'm like, okay, I'm safe. And I'm watching these people as they get to the doorway, they're looking up, they're running. They get to me, I shoot them. Next one, next one. There really wasn't any more civilians coming out. It was all first responders. I said, okay, you know what? That's it. I'm out of here. I said, this is getting too hairy. There's a lot more stuff coming down. I have no idea what's going on. I just got to get the hell out of here.
Around the corner on West Street, George Bachman responded to distressed calls coming from a vehicle.
We could hear a woman screaming in the distance. When the fog of the South Tower started to dissipate a little, we could see it was a woman trapped in a van. And we went down West Street with what tools we had to assist her, and we got around 10 feet away. As I was searching for tools in my pocket, we could hear the North Tower rip open behind us.
It was 10:28 a.m.
It just sounded like a freight train from really far away, and it was just getting faster and getting closer. And the stuff started hitting me, and the only exposed part of my body, the left side, I kept getting hit with pieces of debris, and I was like, ow, that hurt.
Me and the other firefighter went behind the South Tower girder. The girder weighing several tons, shook, broke my back in 2 places, received head trauma as well as burns.
I started feeling the loose debris come up to my knee, then my thigh, then my waist. And then it started going up past my waist, and I kind of came to the realization, like, holy crap, I'm going to get buried alive. And a lot of thoughts passed through my mind. One of them was the fact that I was going to leave my wife, Shirley, a widow.
10-house firefighter Jeff Olson was above the 30th floor when the North Tower collapsed. His wife, Denise, was at their home in upstate New York as the tragic events unfolded.
My house was set up almost in a circle, and that's what I did. I was pacing. So I get in the shower, and our house is tiny. I leave the bathroom door slightly ajar so that I can listen to the TV. And as I'm in the shower, I hear the newscasters, oh my God, the second tower is coming down. And while I was in the shower, at that exact moment, I had a locket that Jeff had given me, and it fell off of my neck. I felt like it got yanked off, basically. And immediately at that second, I knew, I just sensed that he had fallen. What I was praying and hoping was, oh God, please, just bring him home. I don't care if he's hurt. I don't care if he's missing limbs. Just bring him home.
31-year-old Jeff Olson lost his life during the collapse of the North Tower. He died along with Lieutenant Stephen Harrell, aged 44, and 26-year-old probie Sean Talon. The Ladder 10 search and rescue team were one of the first to climb the stairwell in the North Tower. It is not known whether they were able to respond to the mayday. When the tower fell, Ladder 10's driver, John Morabito, was nearby on West Street.
I felt that rush of the ashen air come around me, and it completely covered my world in darkness, and it was absolute silence. I was far enough away that the debris had stopped about a block earlier, and I survived.
The gigantic cloud of acrid dust created by the collapsed tower enveloped most of lower Manhattan. Jimmy Brown was at the epicenter in the remains of World Trade 6. The building had saved his life.
I ended up on my back. Everything was pitch black. I couldn't see a thing. I couldn't see my hand in front of me. I turned on my flashlight, and I couldn't see anything. I couldn't even see the flashlight. It was just everything was swallowed up by the dust.
Got water?
I see fire trucks burning, cop cars crushed, and just this endless sea of papers and dust. And all this while, I'm thinking, I got out. I don't know what happened to the rest of my company.
It was 10:45 a.m. The fate of Jimmy's company, Engine 10, was as unknown as all the other companies in New York's fire department. In the coming hours, the race was on to find survivors amongst the carnage of what was once the World Trade Center. The unprecedented horror of 9/11 tested New York's bravest to breaking point. Amidst the devastation of the collapsed towers, firefighters attempted to regroup their companies. The view towards Liberty Street was a scene of billowing smoke and dust. Somewhere behind lay 10 House.
When the building came down, the debris went over the top of the firehouse and landed in the street behind. All this was piled up behind the firehouse. So I was actually used that to walk up into the window. The back window of the firehouse was probably 10 feet off the ground.
I make my way to the firehouse, and when I get to the firehouse is in complete disarray. There's actually an ambulance backed into the engine bay of the firehouse. The firehouse was completely covered in dust. There was all sorts of debris coming through the front door. There were a couple of firefighters that I recognized. Vincent Geloso was actually walking towards me as I was coming in, and he goes, "Dead man walking." He goes, "How did you survive?" I'm talking to Mike Cancel and to Dulski and to John Schroeder, and these were all guys from my firehouse, and I'm asking, "Where's Lieutenant Atlas?" And someone said, "I saw Lieutenant Atlas. He went on a ferry. He's on his way to New Jersey. I think he had a broken leg. They were taking him to a hospital." I'm like, okay. So now we're gathering this information just from hearsay.
Here on Greenwich Street, 10 House is on the far right, enveloped in smoke and dust. Firefighters reassembled into their companies as best they could. Then it was time to get back to saving lives.
As soon as you walk out the firehouse, you start going to work. You don't have to walk but 2 feet before you could start getting involved. It was all up to us to try to do what we can possibly do. And we were fighting with time. Somebody's stuck under there. How long is the man going to survive, or the woman? And then as we're going, all we wanted to do was find somebody.
And I see an ambulance on fire, and there's a hose laying on the floor. And I turn on the hose, and there's some water. And I'm thinking maybe there's someone in the back of the ambulance that was abandoned because the people had to run. And I put out the ambulance with the hose, and I look in the ambulance. There's no one in there.
Everything was on fire, everything. Beepers were going off, buzzers for the air packs were going off. Everybody's walking around like zombies. We're climbing over debris, and the sewers are flooded, and water's coming up. Now I'm in water up to my waist. Trying to walk, you can't lift your feet up. You don't know what's under you if you're gonna step into a hole and disappear. So now we're trying to shuffle our feet, come across a fireman, stuck underneath the back of a set of stairs. I says, "Oh, let's grab this piece of pipe over here. Give me a hand with this piece of pipe, we'll use it. We'll try to get it out, and we'll use this as a tool. Maybe we can pry something, use it as leverage." And working together, somebody just grabbed this guy when we got a little relief on him and pulled him out. I thought they were gonna rip his leg off, but he got out, and he was alive.
But success with finding survivors was hampered by the fire that took hold in the remaining buildings of the World Trade Center. Firefighters battled to control the raging infernos that only a few hours earlier had been a place of work for 50,000 New Yorkers. The strain on 10 House firefighters was beginning to tell. Some had fathers and brothers in other companies that served New York that fateful morning.
I said, "Cap, I gotta find my brother." I said, "My brother's missing." He goes, "All right, come on." He goes, they're putting together a list of names of everybody missing over here at the command center at the station. And I look at the list, and my brother's name is on the list. as firefighter Mike Morbido. I'm absolutely devastated, heartbroken now. My brother's dead. I love him so much. And I'm exhausted, I'm thirsty. I see this one hydrant, and I get down on my knee, and I'm taking the water from the hydrant, and I'm washing my face, and I'm just kind of taking a sip of water, and I look up, and my brother comes walking right in front of me. I'm like, oh my God, how is this even possible in all of this madness?
I'm looking down, and there's another fireman that's looking down, and we ended up literally bumping into each other. I look up, he looks up, and it's my cousin John. He was assigned to a Staten Island company, and he was there on the recall. And man, it felt so good to see somebody that you knew.
It was now 2:30 in the afternoon of 9/11. Ladder 10's Dan Potter could take it no longer and asked his captain for permission to go and find his wife, Jean. She had gone to work that morning on the 81st floor of the North Tower. Dan hoped she had escaped and gone to their home in Battery Park City.
I don't have any keys on me because I just quickly changed and left everything in my locker. I was knocking on the apartment door, and with each knock, you know, I expected her to open that door up. And I just remember knocking and knocking and banging on the door, and that's when I just became overwhelmed. I said, she didn't make it out of there. I couldn't just stay there, but that's when I came down and I sat on the bench. I said to myself, she's dead. I sit down and sit and I cried.
Dan decides to try the door again, this time using his firefighter's strength.
Just as I forced the door open, the phone rings. I pick it up, it's my father, and he's crying on the other end of the phone. So I said, Dad, I said, I'm okay. I said, okay, but I can't find Jean. I don't know where Jean is. He goes, I know where she is. He says, she's at the Chinatown firehouse.
After surviving the South Tower collapse, Jean Potter wandered the streets until she was told to wait for Dan at the Chinatown firehouse.
I said, you got a beautiful redhead in here? To one of the guys, and there were other companies coming in, so I just happened to catch the right guy that knew where Jean was. And he says, she's right inside here in the television room. And that's when I opened up the door, I just saw her standing there.
We hugged. We were two misses hugging one another. I mean, what a blessing we were given. You know, but our hearts break for so many.
It felt so good to hug her. I was just so glad that I did not leave her a widow. And even at that, the guilt, everything it seemed involved feeling guilty. That I survived.
Engine 10's Lieutenant Atlas did not report back to the firehouse that day. His wife Joanne remained home, waiting for news from the fire department.
That whole day was a blur. I think I started cooking. It was like, I just think it was like do things to keep busy because you have to keep busy. Basically, I think I was waiting by the phone for any kind of news.
By the end of the most momentous day in the history of New York's fire department, nearly 400 firefighters were reported as missing. 6 of the names were from Ten House, half the firefighters who were on duty on 9/11.
One of the worst words in the world is missing, because that's what we were dealing with at that point. Everybody was missing and nobody knew anything at that point.
The desperate search for survivors continued through the night. Engine 10's Pete D'Ancona worked ceaselessly in the most hazardous conditions.
The amount of time we were down there, I didn't see too many people coming out alive. And it really hurt.
Pete is captured here at the end of another night's search.
This don't run.
those colors right here don't run. That was his company over there. That's my company in front of 10 and 10. It's very, very, very hard to keep moving forward if you're not getting anything back from it. You start to give up. After 2 or 3 days, they had set up the ladder 10 apparatus floor as a makeshift morgue. We made it a point to do what we had to do as professional as we can to the best of our ability. I don't know anybody who didn't do it that way. We tried to give everybody as much dignity as we possibly could.
After 2 weeks, it became clear that those firefighters still missing would not be found alive. From Ten House, this included retired Captain James Corrigan and firefighter Paul Pansini, assigned to another company that day, and Lieutenant Greg Atlas.
He loved being a firefighter. They're usually the biggest characters, and well, Greg personified that too, but they love life. And, you know, 1 minute they could be acting like a bunch of 12-year-olds, and then the next minute they turn around and do these amazing rescues, and they put themselves on the line.
We lost 6 guys from our firehouse. The city lost 343 firefighters, some of whom I knew directly. It's hard to go someplace to try to find solace because everybody's hurting and everybody feels this loss. And so the family's fractured, the family is hurt, and it takes time to rebuild that family. It takes time to get back together. At the same time, we're dealing with this traumatic event that's right in front of our firehouse.
On October the 21st, 2001, the remains of Ladder 10's search and rescue team were found. True to the call of the Ten House firefighters, on 9/11 they had been among the first ones into the World Trade Center. And now Stephen Harrell, Sean Talon, and Jeff Olson were amongst the last out.
The firemen would, you know, they were incredible. They were always in my house. They always brought food. My house was wall-to-wall people. Whatever your family would do for you is what the firemen come and do for you. But it was a struggle. It was absolutely a struggle.
After 9/11, life, it seemed, would never be the same again for New York. But though the vast twin towers were obliterated, the firehouse that served them remained standing. Ten House and its firefighters began a new life as the focus of America's grief and pride for the fallen heroes of 9/11.
We were trying to give people hope, and a feeling of goodness is still out there among